To close this opening, I'm honored to introduce a special someone who embodies Taikon's mission through music, 周灏, founding member of the award-winning Piano Quartet. 周灏是清华校友的孩子，小提琴演奏家，也是 Piano Quartet 乐队的创始成员之一。Raised in Southern California, he is a graduate of the Curtis Institute and currently in residence at the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center. He is the only violinist to be both a grand laureate of the Montreal International Violin Competition and first prize winner of the Banff International String Quartet Competition. His music has captivated audiences around the world, and he will be sharing his journey with us today. Please join me in warmly welcoming 周灏.
Thank you, Helen. I wanted to start off today by thanking all the terrific speakers before me, and also giving my thanks to the team that put together this incredible conference. I'm honored to have been invited, and I'm very happy to be participating in this amazing event. When I was putting together this talk, I was wondering what part of my life I would share with you all. I considered talking about performing, but then I remembered there's something I've done far more than perform, and something we've all likely experienced, whether to our joy or grievance, and that is practicing. How many of you get thrilled when you hear the word practice like it's Christmas? Okay, good. Me neither. And if that's hard to believe for any of you, you'll change your mind after talking with my parents for just 30 seconds. But nonetheless, I've racked up in just the last 10 years the 10,000 hours of practice that people say is the prerequisite for mastery. And I know this because I used a spreadsheet to count them up. So how did all of this happen? Well, back in 2015, when I graduated high school, I made a decision at a critical fork in my life. I had two choices. I could either A, spend my next 4 years looking at the white walls of a 10 by 10 room, moving one plank of wood across a bigger plank of wood at a tiny school of 100 people that nobody has heard of, or B, spend them pursuing an illustrious degree at a beautiful institution respected as one of the best places to go to college by millions around the world. Some of you might know already that A was a music conservatory and B was one of the most prestigious Ivy League schools. But to me, I saw a choice between either A, spend the next 4 years working toward a deep passion I believed was worth pursuing, or B, spend the next 4 years regretting that I had missed my chance to essentially board the train to Hogwarts. So why did I see it so differently? I caught the itch for music and performance when I was very young, probably even before I was aware. I was 3 years old. At that age, I had a lot of energy. And because my parents were busy going to school and working, I had a lot of time on my hands as well. I had a very, very long list of hobbies and interests, and all with questionable levels of safety. But here are my 3 favorites. I'd run around the house with a pressure cooker that was probably bigger than I was. I'd explore different electronic gadgets and radios through disassembly. I'd use our TV to do strength exercises. I managed one whole rep of the exercise before the TV fell flat on the floor. My mother figured, why not add one more? So she purchased my first instrument for me. It was a Casio keyboard with 61 keys and 100 demo songs. Suddenly, I was hooked. All my other hobbies faded away into the background, and I was left with one singular interest. And this was an added bonus for my parents as well. Music, after all, was much more enjoyable than missing kitchenware and broken appliances. I gave my first public performance when I was 5, playing Jingle Bells on this exact keyboard. It was the first event I truly practiced for. My mother had one rule. For each day leading up to the performance, I had to play through the whole song without making a mistake. Otherwise, my playthrough would reset, and I'd have to start over from the beginning. To my mother's shock and amusement, on performance day, in front of the whole crowd, that's exactly what I ended up doing, in front of everybody. I began playing the song. It was going well, but near the end, I made a mistake, so I had to reset. I tried again. Things were again going well, but near the end, I made the same mistake, so I had to reset again. And on the third time, the whole crowd rallied themselves to start singing the song with me to cheer me on. Finally, when I made it all the way through without mistakes, I stood up to a room full of applause, and I'd caught the performing bug forever. When I was 6, I began violin lessons, and thus my practice journey officially began. Every year, practice has become more central to my life, and every year, people grow more curious. Even now, after over 20 years, the question I get asked most is, how much do you practice? And this is true of people from all walks of life who hear me. Company executives, arts patrons, elementary school children, senior citizens in care homes, extended family members, and of course, other musicians. So now, having accumulated well over 10,000 hours, I ask myself, did I really need all 10,000 of those hours? Today, we're always concerned with speed and efficiency, the best results with the least time. Could I have used 10,000 minutes instead? At this point, the mantra, practice makes perfect, might be ringing in your heads. What's perhaps more important to know, and some of you already do, is that perfect practice makes perfect. If I'd known how to practice perfectly from the very first hour of those 10,000, perhaps I wouldn't have needed all of them. So how do we practice perfectly? Today, I've managed to boil it down to 3 main discoveries. And my hope is that by sharing these with you, that you'll be able to save time with your own practice journeys. My first discovery, perfection does not exist. It's something we need to create. When we say perfect practice makes perfect, the word perfect is just a placeholder for something that doesn't yet exist. It's not an objective standard to achieve, but an opportunity and invitation to create. For the first 2.5 years, my teacher would draw out little games as a practice tool that my mother would then carry out. It wasn't easy to get me to practice, but it certainly made the medicine of it go down more easily. Then, when I was 8, I began studying with a different teacher. She didn't give me or my mother any games to carry out, so I had to practice by myself, self-directed. It felt impossible. I was so excruciatingly bored without the games that I had no will to even pick up my violin. My parents would yell from the other room when the sounds of my violin would stop after hardly 2 minutes. It was like pulling teeth to even get through an hour. So how did this change? Most of you may remember a phenomenon in 2005 called YouTube, when the whole world can now access the most important videos, like the ShamWow commercial, or Charlie Bit Me, or How to Be Ninja. This was huge because back then I didn't experience many live concerts because they were so late at night that I'd end up falling asleep. But on YouTube, I could see some of the best performances anytime I wanted. I watched hundreds of videos of Itzhak Perlman performing nearly everything written for the violin. Like many other young musicians, he was my idol growing up, with his technical ease, stage presence, and emotional transparency. I was bewitched watching him. And then I found my motivation, because I had a vision that when I walked on stage, I wanted to sound like that. Things started to change. Now, my parents would be yelling from the other room to stop playing because dinner was ready. That being said, practicing wasn't any easier. But now, with a vision of what I wanted to create, I was practicing with an assurance that I was on the right path. My teacher then, seeing my improvement, suggested I enter some of the local competitions, and it wasn't too long until I had my first real taste of success. I believe it was those first bits of inspiration I had that gave me the belief in something I thought was perfect and worth striving for. Practicing wasn't any easier or less taxing, but now I was equipped with the courage to venture into the dark and uncharted woods of practice because I had faith there was something waiting for me on the other side. Your vision of perfection doesn't have to originate from you. That's a fallacy of creativity, but you do need to take ownership of it before you begin the process of practicing in a way that's meaningful. So again, perfection doesn't exist and it must be created. My second discovery, self-awareness is the heart of technique. When I was 17, I started practicing hard to audition for conservatories. And on every audition website, the same thing was listed first, all 3-octave scales in all major and minor keys. Scales are particularly tough, not because, or actually because of how exposed they are. Being asked to get up in front of people to play scales feels like being asked to take off your shirt so people can see your abs. I certainly had no abs to show off. and no scales to show off either. Luckily, I had practiced scales for my own technique because my teachers said they were important, but playing them for an audition was a completely different story. So I concocted what I thought was this brilliant plan. The way to polish anything is repetition. So I would take out my violin, put on my favorite YouTube video, like How to Be a Ninja, and start going up and down my scales. In 1 hour, I could get through the scale of one key and all its arpeggios and double stops. I thought, people run on the treadmill with this strategy to get their body in shape, so this is how I'll get my scales in shape for my audition. I did this for the whole year, up until a month before auditions, when a few friends and I were playing audition repertoire for each other. We had played through about everything, so I asked to play some scales. After a year of practice, I was ready to impress all of my friends with how amazing my scales were. Most of you are probably already guessing what's about to happen next. I'm sure my friends didn't really think much of it, but to me it was a tragedy. My scales were nothing like I had imagined. My shifts were clumsy, half the notes were out of tune, and to my horror, my bow started shaking because I was so nervous, completely out of control. I felt so humiliated by my own attempt, I didn't even make it down the first scale before I stopped. I realized suddenly that when it was time for my scales to be on display, I didn't have any real conscious idea of what I was doing. If I were to knock them out of the park in my audition, I had to treat them differently in practice. So I started practicing them differently. I became intensely conscious. I paid attention to exactly how my ring finger would react to the string when I placed a B in third position, how my right arm would adjust so that my bow would clear the treacherous middle half where it normally shakes, and how I would twist my left elbow to navigate shifts so they didn't sound like speed bumps. The day before my audition, my scales might have been the best thing I could play, oddly even better than my concerto. They felt so solid and under control, and I was so proud of myself to have spent the time and energy to work on them so that they were truly excellent. I've had teachers say the heart of learning is repetition. In the same way, the heart of technique is self-awareness. And increasing self-awareness is the only real way to reliably increase any type of technique. Now at this point, in what I can only see as one twisted joke, not a single school asked for my 3-octave scales. So I guess I became the perfect victim for their scare tactic. But at least I was able to make this discovery, that self-awareness is the heart of technique. My final discovery, and probably the most important, is that it's not about you. Or in this case, it's not about me. When I was 22 and in my final year of undergraduate, I began preparing for one of the largest solo competitions in the world, the Montreal International Violin Competition. At international competitions, the repertoire list is huge. In addition to 6 full works of different styles, I was preparing the Shostakovich Concerto, one of the longest concertos at over 40 minutes in length. During the last month before the competition, I was desperate for a last push to improve, so I'd play for my parents for practice. Many of you probably know what a risky game this could be, especially with parents who are incredibly discerning and candidly honest. It was an emotional roller coaster for everyone. Obviously, my playing had faults, but when they were picked out, my instinct would be to blame my parents. I blamed them for not knowing the music, for not seeing the alleged genius of everything I was trying to do. It was difficult not to get sensitive when it seemed as if 20 years of hard work could be invalidated by a single critical remark. It reached a boiling point one day when, out of frustration, they said, "Look, I don't know how to fix it, but what I do know is that I just don't enjoy listening to anything that you're playing." It was horribly painful to hear, because I realized that all of my genius nuances for them was simply irrelevant. Why would anyone be compelled to see genius in something they don't like? Most of all, in music. Music is something that should be easy to understand, something to relate to. It's not much different from being served food. Having the most expensive ingredients doesn't equate to a meal that tastes good. So for the last few weeks before the competition, I shifted my focus to make each piece of music something people would think is worth hearing, to share a story that someone could resonate with. I spent 4 years in a conservatory learning how to source the best ingredients I could. And now it was time to put together a real dish that someone could enjoy. Finally came the day I flew to Montreal for my first round. It was challenging to maintain my focus, especially with the judges clearly visible from the stage. But I forced myself to do so. Judges or not, these were people who fundamentally wished to enjoy music. The knowledge that I could make a humiliating mistake at any point was terrifying, but the terror slowly started to wear away with each passing moment. For each minute that went by, I felt increasingly at ease to be vulnerable on stage. And for each round that I passed, my confidence in myself grew. By the time I was midway through my concerto in my final round, I was so in flow that I could feel the pages of music effortlessly turning in my head as the performance was flying by. And after what still feels like a miracle, I was sitting at the final results ceremony, hearing that I had won the entire competition. The thrill of hearing that I had won, of course, that's incomparable. But that's a feeling that lasts only about 15 to 20 seconds, and then it's gone forever. What has stayed with me until today is what my friends and family said before the results were even announced. I was told that it was by far the best playing that they had ever heard from me, that they were so captivated by the performance, they didn't want it to end. Now looking back, it should have all been obvious to me, because every great performance was etched in my memory, not just because of their exceptional technique, but because of how deeply I was moved. It was because their music was so personal and honest that it managed to reach through the screen to my 9-year-old self sitting alone in my room. A brief moment where I felt a deep sense of connection to something of unbelievable quality and intent. People say learning is a lifelong journey, and I believe practicing is no different. In fact, I don't believe my journey through practice is even unique from that of anyone in this room. Because for 16 waking hours every day, or even more for those of you who run on Red Bull or Celsius, we each progress through our own practice journey. And with every day, we sculpt out with greater clarity what our vision for our own life will be, regardless of whether or not we are even conscious of the process. Intentionally or not, we are all practicing a version of ourselves or a vision of ourselves for the future. And since 10,000 hours is all it takes to achieve mastery, every single one of us can claim mastery at the basic feat of just being ourselves and sharing ourselves with the world. And I'm grateful that at this amazing event, we have the chance to share a bit about ourselves with each other and build a really amazing community. Unfortunately, in our own practice journeys, we're limited to our own instinct and education. But for all of us second-generation children, we are incredibly lucky that through the courage and continued dedication of our parents, we've been endowed with some of the best instincts and education in the world. Their hard work every day gives us the opportunity to create incredibly high standards of perfection for ourselves. And all we have to do is the perfect practice to achieve it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.